Hi, this is Tom Soane, and welcome to another episode of The Anonymous Landlord. And you know me, I always bring out the big guns when the big topics are on the table. And this is possibly the biggest gun of all, and he won't mind me saying that. I have brought for you today Paul Shamplina, who's the founder of Landlord Action. He's the biggest name in landlord law, action, defense. He's the star of Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords. He's probably heard that a million times. He's one of the biggest people in the lettings and landlording industry. And I've brought him here for you to talk all the way through legislation, law, changes, rent reforms, private rented sector, and all that stuff that is smashing us landlords to bits. So Paul Shamplina, welcome to the Anonymous Landlord podcast.
Tom, thank you. What a build-up. Your flattery will get you everywhere. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you for giving up the time. I know you're super busy, so if it's all right with you, I'm going to fly straight into this. Do. And by the way, just as a quick edit, I forgot to mention, we'll keep this bit out, but would you be all right if I use sections of this for the forward of my book to really hit the legislation and law?
Yeah, fine. You can use some of the quotes, no problem.
Thank you very much. Right, back into the podcast. So if it's all right with you, we'll fire straight into this and ask some serious questions that landlords and letting agents are worried about right now. So I'm going to let you do all the talking, mate. Hope you don't mind. This is unusual for me. Talk me through what you think the biggest challenges that DIY, self-managing landlords are facing right now, and what you think they're going to be facing over the next 5 years.
Look, I've been acting for landlords for about 31 years. I issued my first possession claim in 1991 when I worked for a law firm in London. I wasn't a solicitor, I wasn't clever enough to be a solicitor, didn't want to be a solicitor, but I was quite entrepreneurial and I set various different businesses up. Basically, being a landlord now is the hardest it's ever been, period. Landlords have taken a battering. We know that for a fact, in the sense that you've got the word being called a landlord is a dirty word. It shouldn't be a dirty word, but actually landlords are needed more than ever before because we have a social housing crisis. But property management is the hardest it's ever been. You know, I go up and down the country. I worked out, I do a lot of public speaking. I've done the best part of 500-600 seminars up and down the country in 20-21 years. Being a landlord is really difficult. You know, there's been more legislation than ever before. Sometimes legislation is for the better. It raises standards. But you can only bring legislation in if you have enforcement. It doesn't help that I'm on a program called Nightmare Tenants, Slum Landlords, but those slum landlords are criminal landlords, and there's far more bad tenants than there are bad landlords. Let's be very clear about that. I decided to say that, Tom, at a tenants forum, which didn't go down too well, but hey-ho, I'll tell it how it is. You know what? I say to landlords now, and newbie landlords that are in the game, use a letting agent, use them for full management, okay? Finding a letting agent, the decent letting agent, is a job in itself. And there's a whole much stuff you've got to do with regard to looking up online with regard to their Google reviews or all agents, what's their local reputation, what's their full terms of business, how quickly do they pass the monies on, what prop tech do they use, what does full management include? There's a whole load of stuff you need. Cheap is always expensive, but on the horizon, what landlords have actually hit, you've got landlords that have been hit with Section 24 tax. That's not going to be pulled back. That's going ahead. Great coffers for the Treasury. You've got, obviously, the Renters Reform Bill, which we'll touch on, and I'm quite heavily involved. I do a lot of advisory work with the government. The banning of Section 21, big deal. Periodic tenancies, big deal. They're the big two major things. But you have to have provisions in place. Landlords have got to have confidence. Then, of course, in the debacle of Liz Truss, where she completely, I was going to say something else, cocked it up, mortgage rates went up. All of a sudden, landlords were having to pass those rents on to tenants, the rise of rents. Historically, landlords don't put rents up, period. And then, of course, what has happened, and I see this firsthand And I'll tell you later on in the podcast what my job is, because people think I just evict tenants and I'm knocking on doors, and I don't do that. I do it for the TV show and I do lots of media, but I've got 20 staff at Landlord Action, regulated solicitors that are doing that. We are seeing a record amount of landlords leaving the sector, but that creates opportunity. And obviously we go into 2023, Tom, I think that there will be a little bit of a correction in the market, maybe 10, 15%. There's going to be no crash in a million years. I'll tell you why, because demand is at the highest it's been. You're an agent, you're based in Portsmouth. I trained an agent, a very well-known agent 2 weeks ago, Winkworth's at the head office. I trained 10 of their offices, and I'm always engaging with landlords and letting agents. One agent based in Clapham had 42 applicants to one property. One in Bow had 28 applicants. So actually for landlords, if you look at this as a business and you put a price on your time, that's the most important thing. Because do you want to take a call from your tenant that they're pissed and they've lost their keys at 5 a.m, to go round there, or that the boiler's broken down? Can you get an agent to do that? I'd rather get an agent to do that. That's a no-brainer. But actually, if you think about where we're at now, at the end of 2022, you've got landlords now having a pool of better tenants than ever before going for their properties. So even if you bring them down to the best 3 out of the 20 or the 30 or whatever it may be, wherever in the country, it means you're getting the best of the creme de la creme. And then what's happening is these tenants are bidding against each other. They're doing an auction, which has never been heard before. So you're getting more rents than ever before, right? And I have to remind landlords, because unfortunately, landlords do have short memories. As I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. Landlords have had cheap money for a long time. But of course their costs are going up, mortgage rates are going up. And then of course, and everything we haven't even mentioned yet, on the horizon in 2025, you've got the EPC upgrade changes, part of the Green Deal. That is going to be a big challenge as well. So there's all these challenges, and the only way that you're going to overcome these challenges is have the right people around you, the right suppliers and the right knowledge, and have the right people to help you manage your property. If you've got 1 or 2 properties, you've still got to be and think like a professional landlord.
Totally agree with you. And it's like I was saying earlier that, I try and encourage people to set everything up from the beginning, almost like a property CEO, like a property business, where, your tenant is your customer, your property is your product, and your management is the service that you're giving them. Even if you're a self-managing landlord or a managed landlord, you've got to have that same mentality. So you've mentioned a couple of big ones there, like Section 21 abolishment, that's huge. Periodic tenancies, that's huge. EPC changes, massive. Among all the other stuff that landlords are currently facing right now. And most of them don't even know it, do they?
Well, they don't. I mean, look, you've got a 12-point plan on the Renters Reform Bill, okay? And what's actually happening is under that Renters Reform Bill, the whole point that it's been brought in has been brought in to raise decent home standards. The decent home standard is they're saying that 21% of properties in the private rental sector do not reach a decent home standard. Believe it or not, they are saying, and it surprises me, because I've been on, I was on ITV 2 weeks ago with Dan Hewitt, and I've done previously where he was exposing the social housing market and how bad those properties are. Supposedly, the private rental sector properties are worse than the social housing sector properties. I don't actually agree with that, but a tenant 100% is your customer. Without a tenant, none of us would be here. There's no landlord, no letting agent. And, on average, a tenant is paying 31% of their income towards their rent, Tom.
Yeah.
Next year, that will go up to 40%. You've got gas and electricity bills that have gone up 66%, food 16%. Everything's going up. You've got inflation hitting 11%, but on average, people are getting wage growth in the private sector about 4 or 5% if they're lucky. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we've got a really, really, really difficult year next year, 2023. And I'm not a doom and gloom merchant, but I have been around the block a bit, and I've been a bailiff, done evictions, I've been a private investigator. I'm now, I'm a chief commercial officer of Hamilton Fraser, and we act for over 500,000 landlords and 20,000 letting agents. The reality is next year...
You know what you're doing?
I know what I'm doing just about, right? But one thing that I always do is I engage with the customer. I'm all about the customer, And next year, rent arrears are going to go up, period. Right? You don't have to be a brain of Britain to work that out. Landlords are exiting at a pace I've never seen before. So 26% of landlords that use us at Landlord Action serving a Section 21 notice are doing it because they're selling. But there are other landlords coming back in. But the problem you've got are first-time buyers buying those properties, most probably not, or we don't know what percentage. And of course, the deals and the 95% mortgages, they don't exist. And then, so there's a lot of challenges happening. And then, of course, the cost of living crisis. And amongst all of that, we have a rental stock crisis. Yep. You know, and I try and engage the government. I write lots of stuff. So I run a website with Nigel Lewis, who you would have heard of, who's a journalist, called Landlord Zone, which is part of our part of the websites in our portfolio. And we engage and we speak in it. And I put a post out the other day on LinkedIn, had about 25,000 views on it, about the rental stock crisis. It is really, really, really bad. It really is. And yes, you've got build to rent, which most probably makes up to about 4%. Yeah. And they reckon there's about 250,000 properties in pipeline completed and in planning. But that flow's not coming through enough, unfortunately. And then, of course, the unintended consequence in all of this, Tom, and I tell government, and it is the civil servants, and the government's changed, and we've had more housing ministers than you've had hot dinners down in Portsmouth, right? Is you might have a really great tenant, you know, and the name of the game for a landlord is no news is good news. As long as I get my rent, as long as I can get access to my property, the tenant's looking after my property, and I'm not being bombarded with requests, because as a landlord, you have to make sure that property is safe and secure, and you have to carry out repairs, most definitely. I'm happy. But the problem you've got is that you might have a really good tenant. I might be your tenant down in Portsmouth, Tom, and I might be with you for 9 years, good as gold. And you might put the rent up once or twice because you really want to keep me as a tenant. Because what keeps the landlord awake at night? Rent arrears and void periods. Now, void periods don't really exist now because of the stock in the market and they're going so quickly. But then what's happening is you as a landlord, the smaller landlord, the 1 to 3 landlords that own 85% of properties out there, I've had enough. And you know what? I'm a bit worried there's going to be a recession next year. I'm going to cash out. Yes, I'm going to get hit with capital gains, and that is something that's always the biggest bugbear of a landlord, of course, tax, you know. But then I'm going to have to serve a Section 21 notice on you. I need to sell that property with vacant possession, not with tenanted, because I need more money for that property. So what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot more of that happening. And then on the periphery, when Section 21 is going to be abolished, 110% is going to be abolished, right? In 2 years' time, when they put a bit like the dates they've done in Wales and in Scotland and whatever, when they bring that date in, what will happen is, because the government won't be able to get the messaging right and they have to rely on us, and there's so many people that just don't understand it, is landlords will panic. Yeah. And what will happen is they'll start whacking in Section 21s before they're not allowed to use it, because of course you have to have, they're going to use different grounds under Section 8. I've got to do a comment on it actually with Nigel. He's just sent me the link of the proposed new grounds. There's going to be about 22 new grounds, I think. And if you want to move back or you want to sell your property, that is a ground, but it's panic. And that's the problem that you have in our industry.
Are those proposed new grounds any different from the ones in the Renters Reform Bill?
Yes, I mean, so I was on one of the working groups ages ago. I've been in so many working groups, I forget which one I'm on. I was on one about access. Yeah. You'll know this as an agent, trying to get access to a tenant is a killer.
Oh yeah.
And you know, trying to do a gas safety inspection or whatever it is. And as a landlord, you've got to do a paper trail. You've got to make your WhatsApp, this, that, whatever, and show that you're a decent landlord. You're trying to carry out works or carry out inspection of the property, but the tenant won't let you in. So that should be a ground rather than breach of tenancy under ground 12, you know. So they need to update the ground. They need to make more grounds mandatory. And it is all about giving tenants greater security. But there's a myth in all of this. The myth is, on average, a tenant stays in a property for 4 years and 2 months. That's a fact. That was as of last year. So they're not staying in for 6 months, 12 months. Yeah. Landlords want tenants, good tenants, to stay in their properties as long as possible. And that's it. And then they want to build a rapport up and have a good relationship, but make sure that the tenant feels that that property is their home. And the more that they feel it's their home, the more secure they'll be. But it is really tough for tenants. It really is tough for tenants because rents are going up. Cost of living is going up. If you've got a landlord that's selling your property, so a lot of it you're driven by the property to secure a property, and then if your landlord's going to sell and then you've got to leave, you know, then you've got to try and find another property. And actually that property might have been really good and actually below market value rent. And then you've got to try and find something else. And then you have to go out the area, or you've got kids that are having to leave their school. I mean, that's really stressful. You're taking kids out of school because tenants have to leave properties. So I do really feel for tenants.
I do. Yeah, I do as well. And I think that's why my mindset is all about treating that tenant like a customer. And it's all a business, isn't it? So if you look after that tenant, then they're going to pay you for a long time, same as a customer does.
100%. I mean, if they're a genuine tenant and they fall on hard times, they're engaged with you. And then and we haven't even talked about COVID. I mean, COVID was mental. I mean, we obviously the court bans, and we started up 4 businesses at Hamilton Fraser during COVID. We've got a really good, something that I really wanted to start up for a long time, which was a passion of mine when I was running Landlord Action all those years ago. I wanted to set up a letting agent advice line. Yeah. There wasn't any decent ones out there. A lot of them are out there are basically legal helplines, not letting agents. So we set up a really good agency helpline called hfassist.co.uk. It's 20 quid a month, 240 quid a year. You get access to experts that have got over 25, 30 years of experience in the lettings industry, and they will speak to you in a lettings agent's language, and you can talk about scenarios. You get free legal docs. You get 24/7 advice line relating to tax as well. Great. And I wanted to make sure we did that because the amount of letting agents, small letting agents, they may not belong to obviously a trade body, but that don't have access to an advice line is actually quite criminal, really. It's bearing in mind they're having to manage all these properties.
I'm interrupting with an important request. Use my lettings team to find your next tenant, to fully manage your property, or both. It doesn't matter whether you've already got a letting agent and you fancy a change, or you just want to find a good tenant. Email me direct. It's tom@soanegroup.co.uk. Or use my property team to find you a good buy-to-let property. Off-market, below market value, high yield buy-to-let properties. Join my buy-to-let VIP list and we'll send those buy-to-let properties straight to your email. Again, contact me direct. It's tom@soanegroup.co.uk, or you can message me through my Facebook page or just comment below and we'll contact you. Yeah, and I think you said at the beginning, choosing a letting agent is actually quite difficult because you don't really know what level of knowledge and experience that letting agent has unless they tell you.
Or you can ask them questions. So, obviously, I might rent out a couple of properties and I use an agent, whatever. Obviously, I suppose I'm an agent's worst nightmare because obviously I just grill them. But you've got to go on a gut feeling. But I expose dodgy letting agents. I've done it on the show. I've done 6 series on the show, and I've gone into letting agents with film crews that end up stealing rents. I represent the property redress scheme. We have 1,000 complaints a year. 25% of complaints is about poor management service. And we are the biggest redress scheme out there with over 17,000 members. So I think that when you go in, it is the biggest decision you're going to make, giving your property to a letting agent, because you're giving the keys away. There's no substitute or recommendation from another landlord. You need to make sure you know what they're going to do with regard to their terms of business. Go into their office, make sure they belong to a redress scheme. They've got client money protection, which is like what we offer, so that if they do end up closing down or going liquidation, your rents are covered. Make sure they've got PI insurance, possession indemnity insurance. How many properties do they manage? Do they belong to a deposit scheme? What inventory system do they use? What property technology do they use? Do they pay your rents on time, or do they hold on for it for 10 days? I mean, there's 1,001 different questions you can ask. And I think that, do not go cheap. Cheap is always expensive. The one that's asking for 5% full management.
I agree.
Cheap is always expensive. I'm a big believer in that. But take your time in instructing an agent. There's loads of agents out there. And I think when ROPA comes in, Regulation of Property Agents, which has been kicked into long grass, I think that will increase the level of expertise, because all agents will have to have a legal qualification. That's not mandatory at the moment. I think it will happen in a few years, but
it will be. Yeah.
The Renters Reform Bill, I think, takes preference over that at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. And do you know what? We're talking a lot about maybe traditional landlords becoming modern landlords, but I think it's the same with agents. You know, traditional agents need to become modern agents using technology, systems and processes. And
100%.
And I think if you're a landlord that wants to progress and wants to keep properties, I think you've got to match that with a good agent as well.
But I think also, and you say you've got about 20% of your listeners are agents out here, you know, and I train agents up and down the country on how to attract more landlords to their business, and I look at their systems and their offering, and also just the way that their language to landlords as well, which is really important. I think that you've also got to look that when you use a letting agent, are they a buy-to-let expert in your area? You know, because of course of what you'll be looking to do, is you'll also be looking that you might want to get more below market value deals. You know, can they source them for you? Can they get the best mortgage rates for you?
Yeah.
You know, what do they know about that local area? You need to tap into that knowledge, which is really important.
You're right. And you know, this isn't a plug for my business at all, but what my business does have a property broker. That's what we call it, where we go out and source properties, just buy to let properties.
What, in your area in Portsmouth?
Yeah, in the area. I do quite a lot up in the northeast as well.
Okay.
But
I've actually got a really good guy who's one of our biggest advertisers on Landlord Zone. They're called Landlord Sales Agency. They buy and sell landlords, but I'll put you in touch with them actually.
Please do that. Yeah. And that's exactly it. And because I'm a landlord and a property investor myself, I only really do buy to let. Most landlords and property investors, really, they just want buy to let. They don't want to get into the big refurbs and the complicated strategies. They just want a good property to buy and rent out. And so I think that if you're a landlord looking for agents, the first thing you should do is find out if the agent themselves are landlords.
100%. Definitely.
So we talked a lot there about what's coming, what landlords are going to be battered by and are currently being battered by. What about you? I think you said you're a landlord yourself. So,
well, yeah, I've got a couple of properties. I mean, it's really weird because I should have bought a lot more properties than I did, and I didn't. And it's really weird because when I set my business up 22 years ago, I set it up with nothing. I set up my old business partner, and I went on the maddest journey. And actually, all the money I made, I ploughed back into the business. And it was one of these things and I've got mates. I've got one of my mates, one of the biggest landlords in Brighton. He's got almost 1,000 tenants. Right? I've got mates that are massive in property, and they're always calling me up asking for advice and all that type of stuff. And my biggest regret is I didn't be able to build a portfolio. I mean, obviously I've been successful another way and whatever. Yeah. And I am going to be doing some other stuff, and I'll be a lot more active next year and stuff. But my mindset has been, I'm one of these people, I'm all or nothing. So I thought if I'm going to do property, I would have to do it as a business. I'd have the time to do it and focus and whatever. And I never really had I know it's really strange, I never really had the time to do it. I could have bought a property, don't get me wrong, I've bought property, but if I do it, I have to have a clear mindset, and I couldn't do it. I mean, obviously, if you're a letting agent and a landlord, they fit hand in hand because you're coming across deals. It makes sense, you know. And they fit. When not with me, because I was a service provider, and then I'm 51 years old. I started work at 16 years old. Left school, no qualifications. And I've still got the passion now that I used to have. I'm a workaholic. You know, I travel all over the country. And I think when COVID happened, Tom, I really struggled. I thought, bloody hell, what is going on here? You know, the first lockdown. And where actually, stupidly, I'll just show you it here. I built this extension, right, during lockdown, right? The worst decision of my life. I did not.
Oh, right, okay.
And but when I was in the first lockdown, a day before we broke up, so lockdown was the 23rd of March 2020, 22nd. I said to the management team, I said to our staff in the boardroom, so we've got over 240 staff at Hamilton Fraser. We have all these brands in the private rental sector. We're one of the biggest organisations. I said, you have to engage with customer. We don't know where we're going. No one knew what was going to happen. And for me, I was doing a podcast, Zoom, Facebook Live, webinar every single day or every other day.
Right.
Because the first, I thought, what is going on? I really struggled mental health wise, you know, thinking, what's going on? I'm going to be out here stuck at home because I'm used to traveling.
Yeah, I suppose. Especially when you, like you say, you're all or nothing.
I am all or nothing. Yeah.
1,000,000 miles an hour, and then all of a sudden we're stuck and all these restrictions. Yeah, but luckily we sort of seem to be moving away from it now.
But Tom, we were lucky though, because I have to remind landlords and letting agents, because again, they have short memories, right? What happened was, we opened up, was it the middle part of May 2020? Our industry, the housing market opened up, where if you think that's 2 months after lockdown. And then what happened was, when no one could have predicted it, is they gave a stamp duty concession. So of course the housing market and the sales market went ballistic, but we were in the midst of a pandemic. And of course, if Rishi Sunak didn't bring in furlough, it would have gone tits up, everything would have gone. And I think that support was amazing for the industry. If you bear in mind the travel, the hospitality, the retail, they got battered.
Yeah.
So we were quite lucky. People still need, yes, I think in the resi markets, you had the student market, which really got hit. And then of course, guarantors, because of course, students didn't go back to universities and they were signed up for contracts. And I was getting calls daily from landlords, letting agents and tenants, literally reaching out to me. And then landlords were doing amazing things, but of course, I set up a section with Nigel in Landlord Zone saying landlord heroes, because we had landlords that were doing rent-free periods, that were buying shopping, really helping tenants. And of course, it was all about bad tenant news, bad landlord news and all that. So we were quite lucky. But then of course, the guaranteed rent, the rent-to-rent market, that got battered as well, because of course, those operators weren't passing the money on. And you had people in HMOs and foreign nationals that went back home. So there was empty properties. So they was it. But you've got to realise we got off pretty lightly as a resi market compared to the commercial property market, which I did predict from day one was going to get really hit badly. And it did. It really hit badly.
It really did. And you're absolutely right. I'm glad we're sort of moving away from it. But I think now we're going to start experiencing the reality of what that was all about and what that is going to infect the property market with, all of that experience. But no, I appreciate that. Just wanted to sidestep slightly and ask you, you deal with a lot of landlords. I'm talking more about the landlords that have serious problems with tenants, right? So you deal with a lot of them. Can you give me an example of a time where perhaps a DIY landlord, a self-managing landlord, traditional landlord has got into some shit?
Okay, so how long have we got? So look, Landlord Action's been going for 22 years. We've done the best part of 40,000 cases.
Wow.
This year we've done 2,200 cases, the busiest we've ever been. Next year we're going to be busier. We're struggling to find staff all the time. A DIY landlord, even agents, they get notices wrong, don't get me wrong, and we get that instruction. Half our business is agents, half landlords. We do work for big corporates, insurance, all that stuff. You'll get a landlord that won't put a deposit in the deposit scheme. And that only came out in April 2007, Tom. Right? Right? Still not putting deposit scheme. Forget about all these other laws we're making. That's the biggest problem. A landlord that doesn't have the proper contract in place.
Yeah.
That doesn't understand what the Deregulation Act is, the how to rent, EPC, gas safety, so you can't serve a Section 21 notice, which is an issue. And then, of course, referencing, and a landlord, they've gone on to a portal. Tenants are really, really savvy. So, we get, I'm not going to say the portal because I'll end up getting sued, but you get tenants that will go on a certain portal. And then, now it's all changed because the agents are calling those landlords up because they want those properties because there's no stock, right? But an agent, a landlord, he advertises a property, a do-it-yourself landlord. And some of these guys have been doing it for years. I think the guys that have been doing it for 20, 30 years, they're really experienced, but do they want to change? Do they want to carry on? And I think that a lot of those landlords, even if they don't want to sell, they're now looking at, and there is opportunities for agents. And I say this when I train agents, there is portfolio landlords out there that you can get the full management for because they don't want to sell it. No one in the family wants to do property management. But they want it to run because, of course, the legislation, which is obviously a real big bugbear for landlords, or not understanding it because, of course, you can be fined or you can't serve a notice or whatever it may be. But a landlord that he might advertise property in a portal, and you get tenants that are so clued up. They ask more questions to the landlord than what a landlord should to the tenant. And they find out if they're an individual landlord, the 1 or 2 properties, they're a little bit desperate, they need to rent out because they've got the mortgage to come in the end of the month. And then they might I'll pay 3 months up, but really they're a serial bad tenant. We expose them a lot on the TV show. Someone that goes from one property to another, stay as long as possible. The worst serial bad tenant guy we had cost 6 landlords £148,000. And I exposed him on a TV program called Inside Out on BBC One, and that was 11 years ago. God knows what's happened to him since. Landlords don't do referencing properly, and really my advice to you landlords and letting agents out there is get rent guarantee insurance, a no-brainer, £200-300. You pass a reference, they qualify for it. and you know the rent, they normally cover 2.5, 3 grand a month. You get your rent, and then they cover legal eviction. And we do work for insurance companies, you know, on that. So bearing in mind, you've got a cost of living crisis. I think that, you know, agents have a duty of care to their landlords to say, look, we recommend, a landlord don't want to pay it, you know, and then of course he gets a bad tenant, and then that's his fault. But I think do-it-yourself landlords don't reference properly. You know, there is some really good prop tech out there that can really help you, but affordability is really important. And I would say to landlords as well, Tom, and I always hear this from agents that, we can't pass on the referencing report to the landlord because of a breach of GDPR. That's incorrect. If you've got a referencing report on behalf of your landlord, me as a landlord, I want to know it. I want to see that, and I want you to explain why you think I should take that tenant, because I'm going to be guided by you as a professional. But do-it-yourself landlords, a lot of the time they can get the referencing wrong or not understanding. A lot of the time it's naivety, but it's no form of defence, unfortunately. Yeah,
I'm with you. And what I call the ultimate landlord, the anonymous landlord. It's the name of the podcast. Yeah. It's the name of my book. It's the name of the whole mentality and mindset that I'm trying to.
You're not the secret landlord on Twitter, are you?
No. I'm the anonymous landlord. like for me, the anonymous landlord is the landlord that has the right people in the right place doing the right things for them. Yes. So that the landlord isn't being that hands-on, I'll do, you know, because no one invests in property because they want to be a letting agent or a tenancy manager. No one does. So that's my goal, if you like, is to get all traditional landlords, whether they're DIY landlords or agent-managed landlords, to be anonymous landlords. And so I'm going to put that back to you, and I've explained that for a reason. How do you think, given your mass of experience and stories and examples of what can go wrong for landlords, what could you say to every landlord to say, go and be a fucking anonymous landlord?
I would say, for a landlord, if you've got one property, you want to go on a journey, I think next year will open up some more opportunities, i.e. below market value deals that are more reasonable. Well, you know, I think there'll be more opportunity next year.
I agree.
The biggest worry is mortgage rates, obviously. I would say you have to put a price on your time. Put a price on your time actually can equate to being an anonymous landlord, right? You sit in the background, you get an agent to do everything. And actually, if you want to grow and build your portfolio up, you need to, like I said, I couldn't do it because I was focused, I was doing all this stuff. You've only got a certain amount of bandwidth. I want to build a portfolio up. I want to build a port, whatever it is, whatever my strategy may be, commercial, short, whatever, you know, shared accommodation, whatever it may be. I want to have a mixed portfolio and be diverse, whatever. I can focus on that, and I can look, and I can property source, I can network. If I'm doing property management, like for argument's sake, let's say I've got an HMO, right? I've got 10 people in an HMO, and I am hands-on. I'm old school hands-on. And I've got the old school mentality, but I've just started being a landlord and I'll build my portfolio. I'm not going to have time to be able to do that. You know, property management for an HMO is the hardest thing ever. You're putting 8 or 10 different strangers in an HMO. You're referencing them. You're doing all the paperwork. You're doing all the compliance, the fire door, this, that, whatever. There's all the cost. And then what you've got to do is you've got to hope everyone gets on with each other, right? Because they're all pure strangers. They're from different walks of life. They're different cultures, belief, religions, right? Different work patterns, you know. And then what you become a social worker, a mediator, counsellor, okay? You have to you have to be a people's person. So I think you need to learn early. And I say this to all my landlords, is that, you know, if you're going to be a landlord, go early on or whatever, use an agent for full management, understand what they're doing. And this is the problem with letting agents. They don't peacock and showcase what they do. They don't talk about it. And actually, historically, letting agents undercharge too much for what they do. If you actually would charge the amount of hours you spend doing a tenancy, you know, managing a property is actually very cheap for a landlord. I don't care what anyone says.
Yeah, but surely from a landlord's perspective, you know, I could save that 70, 80, 90, 100 pound a month and do it all myself, right?
Look at the time you've got to spend.
Yeah.
Right? And this is where it is. So I put this question to David Cox at Arla. I said to him, do a survey to your members and find out how much time they spend on a 6-month or 12-month tenancy. I bet it's 90, 100, whatever hours. And that's the pre-let stuff, the advertising, deposit, this, that, whatever, inventory. You add it all up. It's hours and hours and hours. And that's what agents need to do when they're showcasing, try and get full management. 60, 70 quid a month is not a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, whereby you don't do absolutely one thing. All you're doing is look in your account to see the rent's gone in, and that's it.
It's
or
like
you're getting a call to say you've got to pay for this or you've got to pay for that, and that comes with the territory. But you've got a business plan as a landlord. You've got to have a business plan. You've got there's some really good platforms out there. There's Mashroom, Alphalets. There's a lot of self-management platforms out there. Obviously, Open Rent, all that stuff, whereby you see how your portfolio is performing. I mean, there's a really good platform called Landlord where you can actually see how your portfolio's working on a daily basis. Really, you've got to embrace property technology, but if you haven't got the time to be able to do it, or you don't really understand it, just get an agent to do it. But then get the decent agent, and that's a job in itself.
Yeah, and I always describe a letting agent to a landlord as more of it's like an insurance policy, isn't it? You're not actually paying for the letting agent to proactively do these things. What you're doing is you're paying for the letting agent to have out of hours emergency services in place, paying for the letting agent to train up and learn all about legislation and changes and updates and so on, to keep you compliant as a landlord.
Yeah, exactly. And you're protecting the landlord. You're protecting the landlord that you're not going to get fined by the local council. Or you explain what an HMO license is and how that works,
Yeah, totally with you.
Yeah.
So look, there's a ton of information in there, and when I'm going through the editing on this, it's going to be a lot of stuff to dissect. So I'm hoping that a lot of landlords can take from this your advice, your insights, your opinions as well. But I just want to share with everyone that at the beginning of this, Paul said to me, I'm not really into plugging my companies, I'm not really into plugging and selling services and all of that. I'm more into educating. I really want to educate landlords and letting agents on how to be modern landlords and letting agents, or anonymous landlords and letting agents. Cha-ching. But what I'd love, Paul, is in the essence of education, how can you help people?
How can I? Well, I would say with landlords and letting agents, get up to date with the news, what's going on. So subscribe to our website, Landlord Zone. Doesn't cost you a penny. landlordzone.co.uk. We've got a brilliant editor, as in Nigel Lewis, who also writes for The Negotiator. What's happening on a daily basis, legislation, landlord, all that type of stuff, trends. There's other good websites like Landlord Today and Property 118 and really good websites. Understand that, and that's the same with letting agents, get up to speed with what's going on. I think that markets change, areas change, investments change, clientele change. I think as a letting agent, so I'm going to speak to your letting agents guys out there, one of the biggest complaints that landlords have about letting agents is a poor management service and poor communication, all right? Make sure you communicate properly with your landlords and show your value of what you're doing and how you're doing it, and that you're and actually, the mindset is you want to be with that landlord on their landlord journey, not just for that AST, that 6 or 12 months. You want to be with them, you want to help them grow like you're doing. We're doing some property sourcing and you're growing it and you're being transparent and you're a buy-to-let expert and you know your area and you know Portsmouth and you know all the stuff that's happening. Agents have to be experts in their areas, right? And of course they've got sales departments and stuff like that. So I'd say, I still say landlording is a really good business, and of course, I have landlords, I've done a structural change with regard to companies and all that stuff. But I do worry that the government and a lot of the legislation that has come through have come in from tenant groups, and I understand that. But when you're on the ground and you see it and you really smell it, and I worry that the biggest worry for me, yes, it's going to be tougher for people financially next year. That goes across the board to everyone, really. You always know there's a problem, Tom, when there's loads of strikes that go on, and there's loads of strikes that are happening. But things are going wrong when, barristers start striking. Yeah. The middle class barristers start striking. So next year is going to be tough for people, but people need to sleep somewhere. Okay. So I think that as landlords out there, really what you need to do, it's not easy. It's harder than it's ever been. Again, put a price on your time. And if you are paying an agent 70 quid a month instead of 30 quid a month, right? £40 a month, £10 a week for them to fully manage your property 24/7, cover it, deal with it is a no-brainer. Yes, there's going to be costs. and you've got to build in your cost. But also as a landlord, you have to have an exit strategy as well if you want. But actually, if you think about the lack of stock that's going to be happening, it means that landlords are going to be getting more rents than ever before. That's a reality because it's supply and demand.
Do you know, I did another episode last week, actually, only last week. It was about landlords getting through a financial crisis, or property investors as well getting through a financial crisis, because a lot of people just stop investing and they leave their money.
They just watch and wait, don't they?
Yeah. And one of the points in it, I think there was 7 points or 8 points, whatever it was, but one of the points in there was that, hey, you know, you might have to settle for 5% return on your investment for the next couple of years, rather than 15% that you've been enjoying. But something is better than nothing, right?
Yeah. I mean, on that point, I think I say it on every webinar or every podcast, so I apologise if people have seen this before, but I'm a big believer in this, and it backs up what you've just said, Tom. As landlords, it's a long-term game. It's not short-term, it's long-term. And as landlords, you can't eat steak every day of the week. Sometimes you've got to eat egg and chips. It ain't that bad.
Love that. And that's just made me hungry. So on that note, we're gonna end the podcast episode there. And I want to say as well, Paul, thank you very much for giving me some of your time today. And on behalf of all of the landlords and all the letting agents listening to this, go back and listen to this episode again with a pen and paper and start writing down your to-do list and what you need to start putting into place, and especially landlords. There's going to be things now over the next couple of years coming up that are going to be really challenging from a legal perspective, from a financial perspective, from a landlording perspective. So Paul is here. He said go to his website, paulshamplina.tv. Go and check him out. Watch his videos, listen to him, learn, and be the best landlord you can be. Paul Shamplina, thank you very much for joining.
Thanks, Tom. Keep well.
And that now concludes another episode of The Anonymous Landlord. Hi, this is Tom Soane, and I hope you found that useful. Now, my next video is right there, or you can subscribe and follow for more videos just down there. Or if you want to book a call with me and my lettings team or my property team, then you can just click right there. Speak to you soon.